Okay, picking up where we left off with Columbus. In the 1480s, he came up with this idea and he planned it all out. He called it the Enterprise of the Indies. The Indies were the islands off Southeast Asia. There are a lot of them out there. So the idea he had was, assuming that the ocean that lay west of Europe and the ocean that lay east of Asia were the same ocean, he proposed to sail across it. Of course, it takes money to do that. You have to have ships, you have to have sailors. That's beyond the pocketbook of somebody like Christopher Columbus. He needed deep pockets backing. So he made a nuisance of himself for something like 7 or 8 years, tugging at the sleeves of various European monarchs. The King of France, King of England, various potentates in Italy, and a royal couple in Spain who were both monarchs in their own right, King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile y Leon. She was queen of 2 countries. They married, pooled their kingdoms, and that's kind of the beginning of the unification of Spain. Anyway, what would happen, the reason it keeps being turned away, even though if this works, this is huge. If you could go sailing directly to the east and come back with a bunch of that stuff, this would be big. But monarchs learned to be careful, and they would listen with great interest and then prudently say, I'll get back to you. I got to check with my people. They would check with their own geographers who would say, Your Majesty, this guy's lost it. The problem they're pointing out is that it's not that the world is flat. That's not it. Or that they think the world is flat. What they understand is that the world is big. Okay? Nobody knew for sure exactly how big it was, although the distance around the world at the equator had been correctly calculated in the 3rd century BC by a Greek mathematician. It was out of reach. Yeah, you might be able to do it, but it's out of reach. The largest ships then available in Europe could carry enough food and water to sustain the crew for about 5 or 6 weeks. And it's out of reach. It's like we know where the planet Saturn is. That doesn't mean we can go up there. So he kept getting rebuffed. Interestingly, in the early 1490s, the King of England, Henry VII, father of the notorious Henry VIII, and a notorious penny pincher actually, Henry VII was ready to sign Columbus to kind of personal services contract, but the Spanish beat him to it. Anyway, in 1492, he got the backing he'd been looking for from the King and Queen of Spain. There's a backstory on that. 1492 would be a hugely significant year in Spanish history. Well, it is, whether Columbus had sailed or not. All right? You see, it goes way, way, way back many centuries. The religion of Islam began in the Arabian Peninsula. You think I've changed the subject? Not quite. In the year 622. It took root and just exploded out of the Arabian Peninsula kind of in all directions, across North Africa, across the Strait of Gibraltar, which is that narrow like point there almost connecting North Africa and Spain. It's named for Gib al-Tariq, an Islamic conqueror, and they had taken the entire Iberian Peninsula, that's Spain and Portugal, were across the Pyrenees and into southern France in the 740s when an army of Frenchmen brought them to ground, stopped them, pushed them back. That turned out the other way. If you wanted to write a screenplay for a historical movie, you could write anything you want to because they know the battle occurred. They're not even sure what year it was. Few details are available, but it happened. All right, so Christian Spain then reconquered itself. It took 700 years almost. They call it the Reconquista. And Spanish historians can argue about it, but bit by bit, Muslim rule was reduced and reduced and reduced. And the final act in that play was when a little Islamic kingdom called Granada, which is on the Mediterranean coast of Spain, just northeast of Gibraltar, was finally taken over, the Muslims expelled. So that completed the Reconquista and Spain coming back into existence. Well, Ferdinand and Isabella are happy about the victory, but they're stone broke after a long war. By the way, the Reconquista was not a constant war. It's on again, off again. They decided to finance Columbus, give him a shot, especially since the Portuguese look like they're going to find an alternative route. And they did. So Ferdinand was doubtful. Isabella wanted to give it a try. So they borrowed the money. They rented 3 ships, and by the way, the owner of the ships is along for the trip. Hired about 100 sailors. Gave Columbus the right to rule whatever he might find. He could claim a share of whatever things of value he might bring back. He was given the grand title Admiral of the Ocean Sea. He was given the proverbial pat on the bow, honey, and go for it, big fella. I did the last part myself. So in the summer of 1492, 3 ships, only one of them of any decent size, set out from Spain. They stopped off in, I believe, the Azores Islands, take on supplies, and then they headed southwest. And they're like Captain Kirk on the Enterprise. They're going where no man's gone before, at least for quite a while. I remember when I was about the 6th grade, I read a book about this and got the impression they're out on the ocean for just months and months and months. In fact, it took them 33 days. That's time for the crew to get antsy. Columbus had to promise at one point that they'd turn back if they didn't find land in 3 days from that time. I kind of doubt he would have followed through on that. He posted a reward of really valuable gold coin, which would be the reward of whatever sailor spotted land first. And it happened. A little bit after midnight on October 12th, 1492, a common sailor named Rodrigo de Triana was manning the crow's nest, as they used to call it. That's a basket-like thing near the top of the tallest mast on the biggest ship. He's on his watch up there, and he saw an island in the distance illuminated by the moonlight. The next morning, the ships dropped anchor, got on their boats, and came ashore. Thus did Columbus discover the Bahamas. Back in the early 1990s, when it was about to be 500-year anniversary, a lot of research was done with Columbus's logbooks. As far as anybody can tell, that island is now known as Watling Island, nondescript little place in the Bahamas. So they went through a ceremony, Europeans love that, claimed the island in the name of the Spanish monarchy and gave it the name San Salvador, Holy Savior. After a bit, the local natives came shyly out from behind the bushes. Columbus described them as being, in his words, naked as the day their mothers bore them. But they looked healthy, and he figured they could be Christianized and be made into good servants. Oh, yeah. Try selling that one. They were very friendly and hospitable and generous. They'll get over that pretty soon. Anyway, Columbus then sailed southward and discovered a much more significant place, the island that still has the name. He gave it Hispaniola. We don't really call it that because there are 2 different countries on it, the Dominican Republic in the west, and Haiti, a French-speaking country. Hispaniola is to the west, Haiti is to the east. It's like right and left. I'm just a bit both-handed, and right and left are not the same for me. They're not as automatic as they are for normal people. So maybe we'll get out of Italy eventually. While there, Columbus's largest ship was damaged beyond repair, so they hauled the ship up out of the water and knocked it down and used the lumber to build a fort for the crewmen to live in until another expedition could come pick them up. There wasn't room on the other 2 ships. Incidentally, this just comes out of nowhere. If you've ever been to Corpus Christi and ate at Joe's Crab Shack out there on a pier, tied up behind Joe's Crab Shack is an old-looking wooden ship. That's a replica ship that the Spanish built to commemorate the discovery in 1492. They don't have the designs, but it was the same type of ship by the same age. It represents the Nina, his smallest ship, appropriately named. Okay. I'm tempted to get distracted. So Columbus and his two remaining ships sailed back to Europe. The ship bearing the owner, the three ships got there first, he proclaimed the discovery of a new world. Columbus gets back a few days later and says, not so fast. Columbus insisted that he'd been right. He had been right. He had sailed westward, southwestward about 3,000 to 4,000 miles. These islands were right where they're supposed to be. And what if I were to tell you that Columbus was wrong about one of his most basic assumptions? Am I about to tell you the world really is flat? No. Or the moon landing was staged in Arizona? No. Or the stuff you read in Dan Brown's novels is actually true? No. No whoppers like that. What Columbus was wrong about was how far it is around the world. He had the same problem we often have. How do you distinguish good information from bad information? There were lots of guesses about the circumference of the globe, and the fact that a Greek mathematician named, I believe, Eratosthenes had calculated it so accurately in the 300s BC that even, modern technology has only adjusted his figure a little bit. That's there, but so are a lot of others. So, bottom line, cut to the chase, Columbus was assuming a planet only about 2/3 as big as it really is. Now, if the planet is smaller, you don't have to sail as far to get around it. It's not 3,500 miles from Spain to the Bahamas. It's 14,400 miles. So if the Americas had not been there, Columbus's ships would have sailed away and wouldn't even be a footnote in the history books because they would have sailed past the point of no return and would have perished. So there's your discovery. Columbus ended up making 3 more voyages. The second was the largest. It was 16 or 18 ships, something like that, over 1,000 sailors. There was a third voyage. The fourth one was after the turn of the century. It was kind of an underfinanced, down at the heels kind of thing. On one of these voyages, the third one, I think, Columbus was shipwrecked on, I think, the western end of the island of Cuba. Lived among the Indians for more than a year before he finally got rescued. So Columbus never saw any part of North America. He sailed along the northern coast of South America on one of the voyages. That's it. Now, by this time, the news is spreading rapidly, and increasing numbers of Spaniards, almost always young single men, younger sons of well-to-do families, were coming over here hoping to make their fortune. So the fact that the people coming from Spain tended to be single men means that it doesn't have that much impact on the demographic. Whereas the United States, the English colonies, they're settled by whole families. So there's more of a cultural transference. Okay. Columbus died in the year 1506. He wasn't penniless. He wasn't broke. People regarded him with a mixture of awe and ridicule. Awe because he's the discoverer. He's the admiral. On the other hand, he's a crackpot. He thinks he's gone to Southeast Asia when it's increasingly clear that he had done no such thing. But there we go. Columbus's discovery of America. Of course, it's a discovery from the European perspective, I guess you could call it that. Okay, for the first quarter of a century after this discovery, you know what? I'm going to save that. I didn't realize I was 14 minutes in. I'm going to cut this one off and come back with a follow-up on this.